Welcome to the Mindful Love podcast. I'm your host, Tabitha MacDonald, and I am very excited today to have my friend and colleague on. Her name is Nicole Lancaster, and she is a podcaster, an entrepreneur, and a speaker, single mom, and just overall Wonder Woman. And today, what we're going to talk about is narcissistic relationships. And she's very generously agreed to share her story to help educate and inspire other people who might be suspecting that they're in one or how to leave one and how to like spot the early warning signs. So welcome, Nicole.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this.
It's a big topic. It's a hot topic
I
right now, isn't
know.
it?
I know you saw my pause. I'm like, I'm so excited.
I know you're like, I just love talking about this. This is
Let's relive the
amazing.
trauma.
I know. You
But
know
I
what?
think it's very important that we do talk about it because we're both in the spa industry. I'm an esthetician, and all day long we've had people in our beds, and it's essentially the same scenarios over and over, and people don't understand that it's not isolated to them. It's a very common scenario. So I think it's a very, very important thing to talk about just so people don't feel alone or they can see maybe themselves and be like, oh, that's exactly where I'm at in my relationship right now. So I think it's very important, as uncomfy as it is, to speak about it.
I love that you brought up the isolation piece because I think that like the first tactic that somebody who's um trying to isolate their partner is they isolate them. And
Mhm.
so I think that it's a really lonely journey because you feel alone. You might have gotten rid of all of your friends or not talked to your family about what's going on. And so
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because they do when they come in. We might be like in my massage clinic, we might be the only person that they're opening up to. And I just think that that puts us in such um a delicate position of being able to help them, but I will say delicate.
Yeah, and I think as a society, we've almost romanticized it, right? So it's like that Bonnie and Clyde, me and you is all we need, us against the world. But that's not true. And we've romanticized the fact that we have isolated ourselves from our friends, from our family. Oh, you don't know him. Oh, you don't understand. Where we almost discredit the fact that a lot of our friends and family have had these experiences and they know exactly how it turns out. I know in my 20s, that's exactly how I felt, like, oh, you don't know. Oh, that's not true. But, my parents were just like, we're old. We've gone through this. Just wait. We know exactly how this turns out. But it's the romanticizing of it when it's in fact abuse and isolation.
Oh my God, I love that you use that analogy. Like, I absolutely love it because it is. I know when I met
Mhm.
my ex-husband, it was like us against the world. Like, I
Oh God.
remember that bond, and it was like,
Right.
drop everyone else. I need nobody. You meet all of my needs. And it's us against society. And it was like that. And it's dangerous, right? Because then you
Mhm.
lose your sense of identity. But it is also very what we kind of classify as romantic. Like we think
Mhm.
it's romantic because we've always wanted to be seen or to belong or to be
Mhm.
special to another human being. And I think
Mhm.
that's how they get us. I mean, they get people.
And I think as you get older, you really understand the importance of relationships, not just romantic, but friendships, peers, so you understand isolation isn't where it's at. And when you're isolated, they can essentially have you believing anything, that you're not good enough, that you're not pretty enough, that nobody else wants you because this is your partner, this is your life person. When in fact, it's not. Like you need all these other relationships to be yourself, to then be in a healthy relationship. But again, we romanticize it where we just accept the abuse as, well, it's me and him. He's my team member, or she's my team member, whoever your partner is.
Mhm.
But it's not true that you're not in a team, it's abuse.
Right, and it's interesting because like I think that we if we had don't had didn't have good modeling of relationships growing up,
Mhm.
which a lot of us just don't because the relationship world of relationships has gone kind of awry for a large
Mhm.
part of the population. And so when we look at like that need to belong, I think that that taps into that need to belong and to be seen. But then it's interesting because it's not that the you're not worthy enough for anyone else abuse starts right away. So I was hoping you could talk about like your journey because your relationship didn't start off that way, right? Nobody buys that in the beginning. It's kind of a slow burn.
Yeah, I'd say relationships because there's been a pattern that I'm not
Oh, okay. It's okay.
super proud of. However, each relationship I learn a little different, right? And I think the first time was the worst, and I was 19. I had a high school boyfriend for 3 years, so this was um who was lovely. That was a great relationship. It's just he was in the service, we grew apart. Um, the first bad relationship I was in was when I was 19, and so here was someone that, um again, I was young, I was getting noticed. It was my first, like, adult-ish relationship because he was 5 years older than me, so he had all this experience that I had never had. Um, yeah, and I guess just, like, little by little, things started happening that, were red flags. A lot of I didn't even know. He ended up being, a drug addict, and I had never been exposed to drugs, so I had no clue what that even looked like. He ended up stealing money from me. He ended up stealing my car. It was, I'm going down to call my cousin at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was really taking my car to go buy drugs. All these little things I didn't even know to look for because I had never been exposed to this. My parents had never behaved like that. I was never exposed to this. I was grew up in a very, like, strict religious household. So this was all just, like, new to me, but it was somebody older, somebody who had worked hard, who had made decent money, seemed like a provider, seemed like somebody I could rely on. So I really leaned into that. At the time, my parents had also been going through a divorce about, like, a year before, so I just they were all finding their own lives because they had been married for a long time and they got married very young, so they were finding who they were as adults, and I was young trying to find out who I was as an adult. So I just kinda leaned into that support. Here's this, good-looking guy, um, like I said, he seemed like he had his things together. It seemed like somebody that I could lean into, and it just, over time, just turned into a complete disaster.
I love that you brought up that you grew up in a good home because I think a lot of the times when people grow up in that really nurturing environment, um,
Mhm.
they're actually more susceptible to emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse because
Yeah.
they've never been exposed to it. So they have
Right.
no clue what's coming. They're not even
Right.
aware that that exists. It's like you get
Right.
thrown into the world and all of a sudden you're like, "Oh my God, I didn't know people did that." Like,
Right.
what? Like, so
Right.
there is that naivety of being a young woman and finding her way, and then also going through a hard time and not having that kind of the support you were used to having at home, and like no fault on your parents, right? Like they're doing the best
Right.
they can with their life experiences
Right.
too. And and so like it is you were just like the most vulnerable target is what I would say.
Yeah, and, my parents were so religious in the fact growing up, now they have different ideas on spirituality, but growing up, I mean, I never even saw them drink in the house. Um, there were certain things that we could not watch. They never fought in front of us either, which now growing up, I'm like, "Oh, I never saw conflict resolution between my parents." It was, behind closed doors, they would have discussions. I never heard screaming or yelling or fighting. It was behind closed doors, they'd resolve their conflicts and they'd come out. So it wasn't like, um, I wasn't like living in turmoil. I wasn't living in chaos. But I also think, like you said, it kind of made me like, oh, well, maybe have faith in someone or trust someone or even just not understand the signs when they were presented to me.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really valuable insight because I've seen this a lot with some of my clients where they did grow up in that really stable, loving environment, and then they weren't prepared for it. And then there was
Yeah.
also that shame of, I don't really know what's happening to me. I don't know how to deal with this. And nobody I know knows what's going on. So I don't know who to reach
Yeah.
out to because I was never educated on it because nobody in my life knows what it is. And,
Yeah.
narcissists tend to be quite um charming and charismatic. So everyone else
Right.
is like, oh, what a great guy.
Right.
What a great guy. Handsome, got his stuff together. And this is
Right.
women too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not bashing on men. There's lots of narcissistic women out there too. And
Right.
it's like this, oh my gosh, everyone else loves him. It must,
Yeah.
maybe something's wrong with me.
Yeah. So when we had finally broken up and like, it was the narcissistic, but then it was also, the comments, the emotional abuse that nobody else is ever going to want me, or, now he's trying. It was the process of trying in therapy, and now I got to stay with him to help love him through it. Um, so once I got out of that, I started realizing that everything that he had said was false. Like I was good enough. I was pretty enough. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm getting attention from men." And I was, a teenager and I had gotten this relationship. So I wasn't used to like doing that. I mean, I remember the first time walking the airport and I was like, "Men are looking at me. This is weird." Like he said nobody would ever want to be with me. They would just use me for like this is weird, Like it was so weird. Even I remember the first time I went grocery shopping and I didn't have somebody telling me how to load a grocery cart. It was liberating, and I just threw the shit onto the belt. I'm checking out and I'm like, like throwing it as I
Yeah.
want to because no one was there to tell me the boxes had to go with the boxes and the cans with cans, just simple little things like that that you don't realize are a form of
Uh,
control or abuse.
Can we talk
So
about those?
liberating to
Because
have it.
I really want people to understand that
Yeah.
that there is like small things that
Yeah.
it's not necessarily always the big, oh, nobody would ever want you. It's like
Yeah.
it's the small things
Yeah.
that really start getting us into that cycle of shame. Like, oh, I don't even know
Yeah.
how to load a shopping cart. Dang it. I
Right.
really do need him. I really do need
Right.
how would I function without him if I didn't know that? Like, so this is a slow burn. So I'd love to hear about some of those small things that you realized after you broke up so that if people are listening, they can kind of look at their relationship and go, oh, am I ignoring some of these things that are very controlling?
Yeah, I think it's even, commenting about the way that you look, right? Your hair, your clothes, maybe even your body at some point, just like little jabs, like, oh, um, you're looking fuller, or oh, look, you have stretch marks there. Do you not know you have stretch marks? Like little things like that, where it's not necessarily like an attack. My last ex, I remember we had just started dating and it was a can. I was opening a can of like beans or something. And he was telling me that's not the way that you opened it. And I remember looking at him and I was like, I am 30 years old. It is not black or white. There are a million ways to do things. And you're trying to teach me how to open a can. And I should have ran. Like that should have been the biggest red flag and run. Um, but little things like that. Oh, why are you cooking it like that? Oh, why like who cares? Who cares? But just little controlling things about cooking, clothing, oh, well, I'm not acting this way, or I'm doing this because you're acting this way, or you're doing, and there's a lot of reactive abuse I noticed in narcissistic relationships where they do something so you react. And then you feel like the crazy one, or you feel like the reactive one, but when you think back to it, it's like, well, I reacted because I was pushed this way or I was pushed too far. And it wasn't that I can't control myself or control my temper. It's that I was pushed and pushed and pushed until I exploded. And then once I got that reaction out of me, it's, oh my God, you're so reactive. Oh my God, you're crazy. When I'm not, I've been calm, cool, and collected until I was pushed off the ledge.
I love that you brought that up because that is one of the most covert techniques of controlling another human. My
Yeah.
ex-husband used to do that to me. He would wind me up and he would wait and he would push and he would prod and he'd look for a way in. And then I would explode in
Yeah.
anger and like complete just word vomit rage. And then
Yeah.
I'd run off crying because I was like, why am I such an angry human being? And
Right.
when I was going through my divorce, my therapist said to read the book The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner. Completely changed my life. I was like,
Wow.
oh, this is our entire relationship. Like he didn't know how to express anger, so he would wind me up so I could express it
Yeah.
for him. And then I would be the lunatic, and he got to sit there all calm and be like, look, kids, your mom's crazy.
Yeah.
Awful
Right.
experience. Awful,
Right.
awful experience. Like, I
Right.
don't lose my temper ever since I left. Like,
Yeah.
in fact, if I feel the sense of losing my temper with someone again, I'll sit back, and I'll be like, "Ooh, how am I giving my power away?" And I'll really
Yeah.
check myself because I know that's not who I am. So I love that you
My
brought that up.
my guide now is physical. So if I'm in any type of physical angst, if I'm depressed, if I'm anxious, in the house with you, without you, if I'm in physical, my body's like, girl, it's time. Like, get out. We tried to show you so many other ways, but now for me, it's a physical reaction where I'm like, okay, my body is no longer okay around this person. It's not safe mentally, physically. Like, this is not
Oh,
where I
I'm
need
so
to be right
excited
now.
that you brought this up. This is my favorite topic because that's how I got into working with emotional abuse recovery and narcissistic abuse recovery is
Mhm.
because of the body. I would have clients come in and I noticed a pattern in their bodies of
Yeah.
people who endured long-time narcissistic abuse. And I was like, does nobody see this pattern? Like the body is telling you that you're
Go.
not safe, but most people are so disconnected from their bodies, they're not listening. And so,
Yeah.
like, my cue is my left calf will cramp when I'm around someone I'm not supposed to be. Like,
Wow.
so what's your physical cue? Like, do you have like a cue where you're like, oh, okay, body, I'm listening to you?
Anxiety.
It's a
1,000,000% anxiety. Yeah, I remember in my 20s, I was dating this man who was much older than me, which clearly was daddy issues, right? But again, it had been a year and a half, 2 years out of this first bad relationship, and I was like, "You know what? Now I know what to look for as far as drug addicts or people that take advantage of me, so here's this older man who seems stable." Again, charming. Everyone was like, "Oh, we like him. He's so nice." I'm like, "The problem is he's nice to every woman." Like, that's the problem.
he's
So he
really
ended up being a
nice.
cheater. Yeah, so it was a different
Oh, yeah.
form of abuse. But I remember just being in the house because we lived together for a little bit, and I'd be in his house that I moved into, and just being there alone, I was so anxious, and I would start looking everywhere for everything. I mean, I found condoms in the suit, the suit, what are they called?
Those hanger things that like
The
protect.
garment bags.
Okay. I
Garment bags, there'd be
love it.
boxes of condoms in the bottom of the garment bags. He'd have condoms shoved in suit pocket, like, he would just hide them all over, right? So it became a thing for me where every day when I was home alone, I would just scour through everything, and I realized that I was just living in anxiety and depression because 'cause I'd get home and my anxiety would be so high, I just had to do something with myself, and I had to find something, and then I would find it, and then he would come home, and there'd be some sort of justification of, "Oh, that's old," or, "That was here before you moved in." And I had no idea because I just found it. So it was this constant cycle of high anxiety, some sort of justification, worry in the back of my mind. Like and then I just realized, I'm like, Nicole, you're physically getting ill being in this house, being around this person. No, go. And we had talked about this the other day. I think that, a lot of people end up staying or getting in the cycle of someone and it's egotistical. So we see our person that we've broken up with, that we're like, this person is horrible. All we've wanted to do is love them through change or have them change or support them through a change and be a better person. These people don't change. They don't change. They don't change. And that's not me just saying it. We've talked to thousands of women over the years and men. These people don't change.
Well, and that's
So you,
important to recognize. Like, just sit
yeah,
with that for just a minute. Like, because I know they'll have moments of change. They'll have
yes,
moments and periods and stretches of what I would like to say, like a relapse, or not
mm,
relapse, where they're in that remission stage, where
mm,
they're doing the nice things and they're rebuilding the trust and they're rebuilding the bond,
yeah,
rebuilding the relationship. But then they have a relapse. And it's
yeah,
like, unless they're actively working a program, like
mm,
it's not going to change. And there's no cure for it. Like
yeah,
from what I understand in this day and age, there's no cure for narcissistic disorder. Now there's people who have like narcissistic tendencies, and that's different. Like that's not the actual personality disorder. And
yeah,
but like the actual disorder, there's no cure. So it's just therapy and a lot of work. And you have to think about, do you really want to give your life away to that journey,
yeah.
knowing that it's always going to be hard for you?
So I don't call it like a temporary change.
Yeah.
I say that people's behavior improves.
Yes, I
because
love
they're doing what they need to do to get you back. And for me, I've always seen it's a 90-day period. And so your ego steps in because you see them going to therapy. You see they got a new car. You see they've got a house cleaner. You see they've gotten all the things that you've asked of them. And they're doing all the things you've just wanted for them. Meanwhile, they've had this time off, so they've been dating and having sex with people. Let's be realistic, right? But you, in your minds, again, you romanticize. They've been working on themselves for me. So they're doing all this thing, and then your ego kicks in, and your ego says, well, why should the next girl have him? Or why should the next girl have her? You know, now she's being her best or he's being his best. They're living their best life. They're everything I've wanted, everything I've tried to love them through. Why should somebody else get all my hard work? So you go back. Again, it's like a 90-day thing, right? So they're doing exactly what they need to do. I mean, I've had people in therapy. I've had people, talk to psychiatrists and get medicated. Like, I've had people do everything. I've had somebody buy a new mattress because I'm like, you've been single for 3 months. I don't know where that mat. Like, I've had people do the most, right, to get me back because they've changed.
Mhm.
The issue is that when you're back, they slowly start going back to their old ways.
Yeah.
So you allowed your ego to kick in and think that this was supposed to be for you because you wanted nobody else to have this because of all the work you've put in. And why should you go through all this trauma and hard work for somebody to get the best version and the version you always wanted this person? But it's not true.
Right.
So they're going to do
It's
the
just a
same exact
show.
thing to
Yeah.
any person to get that person and behave this way and behave like they're this mentally stable person for a tiny bit until they get that person just like they did you, and then they're going to be the same exact person. So they don't change. Their behavior improves for a small window of time, and they
Mhm.
go right back to who they are, to their core.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I remember when I was breaking up with my ex-girlfriend, I'm fluid, but she would post online about how she did all this inner work and like posted all these pictures of her and her new, younger, beautiful model. And I was in so much agony because I was like, why didn't she do that for me? And so
Right,
I made it mean that I wasn't enough. Later,
right.
when we got back together, she admitted she did it to get my attention to get me back. And so,
Psychotic.
planned, very curated, very planned. Yeah, very intentional. And so, like when you're in the throes of that separation period, they'll look like
Yeah,
they're living their best life, and then you're like feeling like garbage, and that's how
yeah,
they get you back. Do not underestimate. They're doing it on purpose to
right.
make sure you come back.
And also, now that I'm a grown woman who can clearly have empathy for others, what about that poor woman who thought she was in a relationship with someone that loved her? And meanwhile, your ex is calculated doing this just to get you back. But then why are you with someone else? Is it just to have them, you know, as this prop to get back your ex? Or is it so you're not alone? Or is it a combination of everything? Is it a placeholder so that you're not like, it's all just disgusting.
It
It's
is
so like,
sad.
what?
It's
It's
sad.
Yeah, that's my thing now is I'm always like, I have empathy and I feel sorry for the next person who dates these people because, the poor things are gonna go through exactly what I had to go through.
That's why, like, when I'm working with people, I'm like, I love to empower people with intuition and
Mm,
to heal the parts of them that were attracted to or wounded by them. Because
mhm.
if we become a narcissistic proof society, that's what I'll call it, we don't have the
I love
victims
that.
anymore. Because
Right.
they don't have a feed, they don't have a supply, because
Yeah,
people will no longer fall into the trap. But that means you have to know your value. You need to know
right.
your self-worth and boundaries, which to a codependent or recovering codependent feels like death when we put boundaries up because that's our wounding.
Mhm.
But we have to learn how to do boundaries. We have to understand the science behind a secure attachment style so that we can move into that secure attachment style. Because then when you meet a narcissist, they're going to come right by you. They're going to be like, oh, you're too difficult. I don't want to even try. Because you know your values, you have needs,
Yeah,
you have boundaries. They're not even going to want to be in the room with you because
yeah,
you're not going to be fun for them. And so they'll just walk on by. And that's why I love it. Like when I'm teaching love and relationships, I'm like, we just need to become narcissistic proof. And then the next girl isn't going to be there to be swept up in it. Like she'll know how to avoid
Yeah.
it in the first place.
I think we need to be okay with being alone. And I think we need to take the time alone and not put our value, and I see so many women do this, we put our value on the attention of a man. So, we gotta have a man to really make ourselves feel valuable or feel wanted. And I think when you know how to be by yourself and you don't validate your self-worth by whether or not you can be with a man or attention of a man, is when you can really grow as a human being. And I look back to scenarios where I've been in not great relationships and I'm like, no, I didn't value myself then. I had no self worth. Like I can pinpoint how I was feeling, what I was feeling at the time. But I think now, now you can't tell me shit about me. I told you this a million times. Like I've said the meanest shit to myself. Like you can't tell me nothing. I've been a horrible friend to myself. But now I am so confident in my love for myself and who I am for myself and just, me as a person. And it's not egotistical, it's understanding that I'm good, with me. Like I'm solid with me. That you can just start to see. You're like, oh no, this person behaves like this, or this person only wants this from me, or that we're not on the same page. And you can articulate that and set that boundaries. But when you don't truly love yourself, you're going to settle for whatever you can, especially if you validate who you are as a person by the attention you get, from someone.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that's how you fall into that.
Well, and that's why I teach the Enneagram because so many people don't know who they are and they don't
Mhm,
understand how their personality operates. Unlike if
mhm.
you understand the Enneagram, it's like a little manual to your brain and
Yeah,
also to your attachment wounds. So that like when you meet those people and they feel like a soulmate, and then you can realize, is this soul love or is this an attachment wound like lit up
yeah,
like a firework? And I think
yeah,
that's really important to do your inner work. I always wanted to be
yeah,
in a relationship. It was always on my goal list. And the
yeah,
last year since my last breakup, this is the first time in my life where it's just not even something that I'm even thinking about. Like I would normally have
yay.
it in my mind, like in the back of my mind. And for the first time, I'm actually like, it's not even something I'm considering right now because
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying this phase of life, getting to know who I am and who I'm choosing to be. And then
yeah,
spending time with my girlfriends and other friends and just getting to like know myself outside of
yeah,
motherhood. So
that's
it's
beautiful.
been interesting because if you had asked me before, I wouldn't have thought that that was something that I struggled with. But now looking back, hindsight, I can see that I was always searching for someone to love me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I was born in 86, and I think that that was still kind of the tail end of you date, like the old school, you date, you get married young, you have children. And I got pregnant at 30 and I was not in a relationship. We were, dating. And we decided not to get married. I mean, that wasn't even an option. Let me not lie. That wasn't an option. But we decided not to be together. Let me say that.
Okay. I love it.
But in the back of my mind, that's we were told, get married, have kids, have white picket fence, be a family. Like that's what we were told family is. And for me as a single mother, that was still something that I always wanted and always yearned for was marriage. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't get to have a baby with someone. I didn't get to experience someone touching my stomach and talking to my child. The thing I want then is just to be married. I want to be married. And it's not that I actively was dating to look for that, but it's something that I felt like I was missing out on. If you are single and working on yourself, it's not to say it doesn't get lonely. It's not to say you don't miss companionship, but
Mhm.
you know that you're working on yourself and you start to find companionship in other places. And again, it's different because it's not romantic, but you start to really understand like, okay, the societal norm of what it used to be back in the day is no longer. A lot of my friends are single mom friends that, we hang out, we have kids, some date, some don't. But we're there to support each other in other ways versus having that, you know, husband, the husband person in our life. It's just different. You just start to learn how to have those different relationships and depend on people in different ways and ask for help from your friends and family versus that person to rely on. And I have actually been able to see, like, okay, I mean, now I help. be a caretaker for my 91-year-old grandmother who is in heart failure. And now I'm like, okay, universe, I wasn't meant to get married. I wasn't meant to marry, the last person I was in a long-term relationship with, because how could I take care of her? How could I be there for her? And every woman that's been close to me and my family, I've been their caretaker at the end of life. Um, so you see how the universe works, even though you don't fully understand it in the moment, it can be something like this, like years later, and you're like, okay, well, if I was married with a husband and a bunch of kids, I could never be here for this person. So with I'm okay. I'm okay with the way my life is now, even though it wasn't what I expected or what I truly wanted, in those moments. I'm great with how it is now because this is where the universe led me to, and it doesn't mean I won't have those things in the future. It means I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now in this moment because this I'm supposed to be here for someone else in a completely different way.
Yeah, and I love that, I love so much about that. But the thing I wanted to circle back around to was that vision of the white picket fence, because that
Mm,
is why I stayed with my husband for so long.
mm,
'Cause
right.
I did not grow up in a good home, and I had this fantasy that when I was 27, I don't know where I came up with that number, but I would finally be an adult and get to have the family I always dreamed of. I got
Mm,
pregnant unexpectedly at 29, and I was about to leave him, but he said, "No, no, 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 I'll change." And, we stayed, and there was no change.
no.
We had 2 kids and no, there was change. There was a 5-year relapse period where he was sober, so we did have that period of the white picket fence and, like, the big friend groups and the fantasy. And
Yeah.
I think when I started dating when we divorced, I wanted that fantasy. I was like, "I'm not giving up on that." Like, I know it's still out there. And I think the benefit of being 48 now is that I know
Mm,
that's not really on the table anymore because 'cause I'm not having any more kids. I've gone through menopause, like, it's not on the table anymore. So it almost released me from this fantasy life that I'd been
yeah.
chasing, but was never able to achieve. And it wasn't my life path, right? Like that's not how
Yeah.
my life was supposed to be. Just like you just said, it wasn't your life path because you had other things in your life path that were more of a priority.
Yeah. Well, I also think too that people are getting married older now. So I think that the white picket fence can be in your future, but I think in order for it to be successful and for the universe to really bring it to you and have it, you have to be whole as you are as a person. Back in the day, people got married young and they grew together. And let's be honest, people just stayed together just to stay together and it wasn't really successful. But you see a lot of people now getting married older, like as a second time or, maybe even the first time, but they're a whole person getting married. And this is who they are as an adult and as a person now. And yes, we change a little bit here and there, but this is who we are as a person now. And they're finding their partner who's their soulmate because they're on the same thing together. They're on the same wavelength versus, you know,
I'm glad you
accepting
brought
somebody
that
for who they
up
are.
because I just looked up second marriage rates for failure. It's 70%. And that's
A
because
failure?
yes, 70% because they don't take the time to do their inner work. They just take their baggage, which is just a little bit heavy
Yeah.
to the next relationship. And that's why like that it's just funny that you brought that up because we were doing research on it the other day and I was like, "Oh, it's got to be better. People do their inner work." And it was
Yeah.
higher. And I thought, "Oh my gosh, that's why we need to do our inner work between relationships so we don't carry the same baggage into the next relationship hoping it will be different." Like if
Yeah.
it's a different guy, it'll
Well,
be different. Yeah, no, I was shocked when I looked up the statistics.
so there's still hope for me for my first marriage in my older years.
Oh,
That's what you're saying. That's what I took
absolutely.
from that.
Yes.
That's what I took from that.
I'm an officiant, so I would like to be the person who weds you. I had this great business
Great.
idea of doing massage and wedding ceremonies at the same time. I was like, "Oh, it would be such a cool niche." Um, so so I wanna, like, just talk about how do you know when it's enough, and how do you know when to walk, and how did you
Mm,
finally find the strength, especially that younger one, the 19-year-old, because I was in a similar relationship when I was 18 and it was not easy to leave. And I think
yeah.
that one set me up for many decades of similar
Yeah.
patterns. And so, how
Yeah.
did you know when to walk away and how did you do it?
So when I was younger, um, in that younger relationship, he one day just left. He left and moved in with his cousin to Mississippi, and I was devastated because we had talked about the things, the marriage, the kids, the things, right? We'd been together, I think, a year and a half, 2 years, unfortunately,
Which in
and
19-year-old time, by the way, is like 10 years. Like,
is
right?
a
It's
lifetime.
a lifetime. So I do not, any younger listeners,
That
hopefully I
time.
have some. That's a long time. So
Yes. So he called me, and of course, we were working things out over the phone, and he had no money. He was living with his cousin who was, I think, in the Marines or Coast Guard, something in Mississippi. And again, I was devastated because one day he just left. And he was like, I really want to be with you, but I can't live in Florida anymore. I just really want to be home. I want to go back to Chicago. And I was like, yes, whatever you need from me, yes. And my parents supported me. My parents helped me pack all my things into a U-Haul, and we drove to Chicago. And I lasted 3 months with him and his family. His mom was a drug addict as well, pills. It was just horrible. He was older than me. I wasn't 21 yet. I was getting left all the time. I had no friends there. Again, I was isolated, but now he was smart enough to manipulate me and my family to be able to get money to go back home with the things, right? And then we get there and he's trying to take my couch, my table, my dog. I was like, you got to be out of your mind. Like, you think that I'm splitting my things with you? Um, so I realized that he did all that just to get up there. I called my dad and I was like, "Look, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. I know that, you have just helped me move here. You just, spent all this money to help me. Um, can you help me come back?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I knew that it was over because he wouldn't even help me get to the airport. And this was in the time where it was not Google Maps, it was MapQuest. You didn't have GPS on your phone. And
print it
my
out.
sense of direction's horrible, right? So I'd be like in 0.01 miles and I would like reset what is it, odometer? So I
Oh,
would know
I
exactly when
remember
the next one
those
was because I
days.
was so bad, but I'm driving into the city, but he was so scared of my dad. And I was like, this guy has done something really bad to be terrified of my father. And he had, it just, of course, in my eyes, I hadn't like seen all that, right? Um, so I came back to Florida, and of course, he had truly like worked on himself. He ended up coming back a few months later. He had been dating someone, but he really loved me, all the things. Um, and it just started to fizzle. He ended up moving back too, and I just started seeing things. He started, talking to people on AOL Instant Messenger. I started looking at his call records. It was just the repeat pattern of what he had done in the past. And the final thing was he was like, "Can I please just stay on like your phone records? I'll give you money." And I'm like, "Sure." And I started looking at his phone records and he was calling someone with a different area code. And I confronted him. He's like, "That's my cousin." I was like, "Your cousin doesn't live in West Virginia." And I hung up on him. I disconnected his phone. Anything that was left in my house, I threw away. I was just done. As a woman, I think that when we're done, we hit that done.
Yeah.
And I just fallen for it one too many times. It just, ugh. And now, like when
That
you look
brings
at those
the
people,
point.
I'm like, I can't believe I ever let that do that to me. Ugh.
I know, right? When I look back now, I'm like, what were you thinking? And then you have to have
Mm.
compassion for the younger version of you who didn't have the growth and knowledge that you have now. Like,
I think she just wasn't thinking. I'm gonna say that. It was just like a lapse of no thoughts.
no, that you're a five. That nope, that you were definitely thinking. I'll give you my Enneagram analogy right now. I love my fives. The head triad tend to be very disconnected from their emotions.
Mhm, mhm,
And people like that know how to put a direct feed into your emotional center. And because you're not connected to your emotions, they know how to feed something and to like use it in their advantage because five, sixes, and sevens are the most dissociated from their emotional states. And so it's like the prime um, entry point for someone
mm,
who knows how to manipulate emotions because you don't know
mm.
it's happening because you're up here in logic and reason. And so
Feels right.
that's just my little Enneagram
Feels
tidbit.
right.
Yeah. And it's like that's why number one, we have to become emotionally intelligent. Because if
Yeah.
we're not emotionally intelligent, someone can come in and see that gap in our needs list because we're emotional beings and
Yeah.
fill it. But they'll fill it with the emotions they want to. So
Yeah.
becoming an emotional ninja is like number one. And then people can't get in there and twist them for you.
Well, I think dating now too, I'm so much more self-aware. So now when I date, I'm not desperate. I'm not like, pick me. I want to be with someone. Like I'm yearning for you. You seem like the perfect person on paper because I've dated the perfect person on paper and they were such an asshole. Like, so I no longer am like that yearning. Like, I'll go on apps and I'm like, oh, he's cute. Oh, it seems like we could get along. And then we'll talk a little bit and I'm like, no, like, you're not what I'm looking for. I'm not desperate to go out with you. I can feed myself. Like, if you're gonna, like, make me get up, shave my legs, and put on some eyeliner, it's gotta be worth it. Because if it's wasted, I'm gonna be pissed that I moved, from binge watching Bridgerton's coming up, from
I'm
binge
so
watching
excited.
Netflix. Like, you've now taken my time, and I've prepped for this, and it's a waste. So it really has to be worth it now, and I really have to understand, okay, well, maybe we're on the same page, and if not, maybe we could still be good friends if it doesn't work out for dating. But I just date with completely different attention. I have a life. I'm
Mhm.
not waiting for a text to respond to a text like, oh, they know I'm a great respond. Like, no, I have a life. I get to it when I get to it, not in a rude way, but it's completely different dating now
Yeah.
versus before.
It's funny, I go on the apps. I think I went on the apps the last time maybe a year and a half ago, because I had an intuitive reading and it was like, it told me you're not going to meet your person on the app, so meet them in alignment with your life. Like they're just not there. And it was this huge like relief because I was like, "Oh, I don't
Mm,
even have to bother with them anymore. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I know that the person I'm going to meet one day is just in alignment." And so, because I hated the apps, I was like, I don't want to sit here and chit chat
yeah,
about the same thing over and over again and
yeah,
just be bored out of my
I
mind
know.
by uninteresting conversations. Like,
I
what a waste of
know.
my day. I could do that with Netflix. Yeah, like, yeah, no.
I know. But then I'm also like, then I gotta leave my house. You know me as a five. I'm like, but then I have to leave my house. So I'm working on that. That is definitely something that I'm working on.
Well, I'm
Not
not
being
saying
such
the
a
apps
hermit.
don't work. One of my clients just met her boyfriend on the apps, and she's so happy right now. Like they're really getting along. They're perfectly aligned. We're working through all of the
Yeah,
attachment issues in our sessions together because they come
that's
up, and
awesome.
it's like, you don't need to be totally healed before you start dating. Because when you start dating someone, it's going to bring up all your baggage and garbage. And so it's nice to have like a coach while you start dating to help you work through it, because if you don't have that like ally, you're going to fall back into some old patterns and be like, it didn't work. And then it's like, no, 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 it's just, this is good. It's just bringing up stuff we didn't know was there. And you want to keep working on yourself while you're, integrating into learning how to be in a healthy, secure relationship. So,
So what you're telling me is that I can text you to be my dating coach and be like, "Hey girl, what do you think of this guy?" And you can just send me like a red flag or a green flag and
oh
like
yeah. Yeah, I can do readings on it and they're extremely
if
accurate. Actually, my one of the guys from my intuition training in January, he goes, "Your reading was so accurate. I went home, I met the exact person you said I was going to meet. And
that's
not
awesome.
only that, but like, the relationship ended, but it was good. It was exactly what I needed for the growth period." And I
That's
was
awesome.
like, yeah, that's what we had talked about in the reading. And I get that a lot where it's like, oh my God, your reading was so accurate about this person I was going to meet and the experience I was meant to have in it. And so yeah, using
Yeah.
intuition or meeting with someone who's an intuitive coach is amazing because we can read that person's energy fields too and kind of go,
Yeah.
is this, and sometimes the right person for you might be the person who's going to challenge you and break your heart because a lesson needs to be learned. Not that I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that's like a common thing, but sometimes that is the right person for you to help bring up something that you need to work through.
I think when people are getting out of their narcissistic as women, when we get out of a narcissistic relationship, a lot of times we have to live in our masculine so much in those relationships to keep ourselves protected, to keep our house going. If we have kids, just to like keep the household running. That I think the hardest thing for me for someone I know is just be able to live in our feminine again. So I have really just been working on just relaxing and being back in my feminine and my soft because we're always so guarded and tough and strong in these horrible traumatic relationships that it's just learning to just be gentle and soft and be able to live in our feminine around men again has been a big learning curve for me when I've had to be just living in my masculine for so long. But it feels good. Like it feels good. Just that's what I want. I want to live in my feminine with a man, but finding the man who actually lives in his masculine, not toxic masculinity.
Right, because there's a big difference because I think one of the reasons strong, powerful women are attracted to narcissistic partners is
Mhm.
because they give you that false sense of, I'm gonna take care of you because they have that like
Right,
strong initial masculine energy. And
right.
it doesn't matter if it's a male or female. And you go, oh, I can relax into my feminine. This is amazing.
Mm,
And then
right.
they don't, they actually do the opposite, and then you can't live in your feminine at all. And I
Yeah,
think that that is how they get a lot of women, is that we're tired of living in masculine energy and we want that feminine energy, and they know how
yeah,
to make us feel like in the beginning that that's what we'll get in the relationship. And it's like, oh, I
yeah,
breathe. I feel safe in this container of masculine energy. But then it's toxic. And,
yeah,
really teaching people about the difference between toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, and then the opposite of that really healthy energy, and how to bring that out, especially when you're
right,
dating. Because if you show up and
right.
you're masculine when you're dating, you're gonna get a very feminine man, and then you're gonna be very mad later. And then
Yep,
the same goes with all of it. How you show up when you're dating is what you're gonna get. And then a lot of the time it's not the person that you wanted to be with. So
right.
okay, I could talk to you about this for hours, but I think we have to wrap up. Thank you so much. If you could give like just one little word of hope or inspiration to anybody who might be in a similar position, and I'm really like really thinking about the young girls who are super vulnerable
Yeah.
to this, what would you tell them to help them say you can leave, like it's okay, you'll survive this?
I would say he's not the love of your life, babe. He has you convinced. Again, romanticizing the Bonnie and Clyde. There's so much more for you out there. And I know that there's like a war right now against men and women. But there's so much more. There's so many great men out there. There's so many loving, caring men who want to take care of you and not like in a financial way. They want to make sure you're good emotionally. They want to make sure you're good physically. Like that is a true masculine man. Whatever little boy you're playing with right now, he ain't it. Um, there's so much more for you out there. And once you just kind of separate, as painful as it's going to be in the beginning, every time it gets a lot less painful, and every day gets less painful than the day before. And once you're able to just work on yourself and get separated from that situation, you're going to see how much love and abundance of love and just how many great men are out there that you're not even going to remember that dude's name.
Love that. I love that. Thank you so much. That's amazing and beautiful and absolutely spot on. So, I was just thinking, we are definitely going to have some Bridgerton talks on our podcast coming up as soon as
Can't
season
wait.
3 comes out, because I do
Can't
not
wait.
I was like, "Oh, podcast segment coming, Bridgerton talks." That's one of my favorite shows on the planet. All right. Thank you so much today for joining me. And I just really appreciate your vulnerability. And I really, really appreciate you telling your story, to help other people, women, and who are in similar positions, just kind of have that like validation about their experience. And also
Yeah.
know that life is actually better on the other side. It's just a
Yep.
bunch of lies that you were sold that it's not, and it really is. And it's hard to know it when
Right.
you're in it, but like it really is better when you're out.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I have so much love for you.
Thank you for having me.
All
It was
right.
fun.
Thank you.